Hi everyone, my name is Rosie. I'm a product manager here at Tynes, and my team and I have been working very hard on building Workbench, which we just released and are going to be taking a deep dive into today. So thank you so much for tuning in. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to spend just a minute or two covering a few slides introducing Workbench in Tynes, and then we'll dive right into the platform and cover a few different use cases and applications of how to use Workbench with Tynes. So with the advancements of large language models and AI, the standard for a user-friendly piece of software has completely changed. And at Tynes, we've been focused since the day we were founded on democratizing automation for your whole team and empowering anyone, regardless of their coding or scripting, knowledge or ability, to be able to build their own automations and use Tynes. So this foundational shift in accessibility that LLMs and AI have brought about is really aligned with our goals at Tynes. And Workbench is a wonderful combination of the strengths of the Tynes platform and of an LLM. And so what are these strengths? Well, LLMs are incredible at natural language processing, and they also have a super powerful general knowledge capability. And Tynes is great at integrating your platforms together, letting you aggregate your data from various private systems in your stack, and even letting you take actions. So we thought, why don't we harness the incredible natural language processing and general knowledge capabilities that LLMs have with the ability to run workflows and access your proprietary systems that Tynes is built for. And enter Tynes Workbench. So Tynes Workbench is a familiar AI chat-powered interface, which, unlike others, can access a breadth of your proprietary data and allows you to take action in real time. Workbench is built on the strong, private, secure architecture of all AI features in Tynes. It's all powered by AWS Bedrock under the hood, which keeps data from leaving the stack, being logged, trained on, or stored. Your data is private to you. It's not leaving your tenant. This is very important for us at Tynes and very important as it comes to any AI feature at Tynes. And it fits quite nicely into our existing product offerings here. So during this webinar, we're going to see examples of how Workbench can be used with our existing Storyboard data as well as cases data, but I thought this slide was helpful to differentiate when you would use each item. So our Storyboard will run your mission critical workflows. When those workflows identify areas that require your team's attention, you'll use cases. And when you as an individual are actually investigating that event on the Storyboard or that case, you'll use Workbench. So let's actually dive into the platform and meet Workbench and look at some examples. So this is Workbench. I can type into the chat box here and Workbench is going to respond to me. And when we talk about Workbench and when I just introduced it, we refer to it as a Tynes-powered AI chat interface. So that's a lot of words together, a lot of big words kind of pushed together there. So let's break it down. What I mean by AI chat interface, that part before Tynes-powered, is you can ask it really anything you would ask any AI chat interface, right? It has that broad general knowledge that LLMs are really good at and really strong at. So I can say, what is CrowdStrike? You could ask any sort of AI chat interface, what is CrowdStrike, right? And they will all respond to you with a nice paragraph that, based on their general knowledge, is correct on what CrowdStrike does, right? But that's about where they end. They don't access your CrowdStrike instance. They can't do anything with your CrowdStrike. They couldn't tell you more about it. And that's really where Workbench doesn't end there. Workbench really kind of starts there, and you start to see that additional value and how it can especially be really advantageous in using it with your other Tynes existing products like stories and cases. So I'm going to say, describe my CrowdStrike environment. And now Workbench is going to actually pull data from my CrowdStrike environment that I've connected it to in real time and give me a much more tailored response of what CrowdStrike is with the context of my system. So you can see here that CrowdStrike went ahead and got my hosts, and based on that, it was able to give me an overview of my setup. I have 7 hosts, and a lot of different host types and whatnot. And so what it did there in running that get hosts is it was actually pulling from these templates and stories. These are the tools, these are the abilities that are Tines powered within that Tines powered AI chat interface that Workbench can access. So templates are going to be similar if you are used to our Storyboard templates, right? They're provided by Tines, and all you need to do, for example, our CrowdStrike template, I connected my credential, and then I selected exactly what exact endpoints I would like Workbench to be able to access. So you aren't just connecting it to CrowdStrike and letting it do whatever it wants. You're able to very specifically define exactly what you would like Workbench to be able to do. And then based on the context of our conversation, like when I said, describe my CrowdStrike environment, it chooses one to run, it gets the response, and then is able to send back that data. That's a really quick example, but let's actually dive into something related to our Storyboard and a little bit more in depth, but we'll keep it CrowdStrike related. So here is our Tines Storyboard. This is a very simplified example, but if you aren't familiar with the Tines Storyboard, you build automations here by dragging and dropping our action types onto the board and connecting them up. They're very visually self-documenting, as you can see. This is a pretty popular workflow where you would ingest alerts probably from a SIM tool or another data source, enrich those alerts with other systems, normalize that data, and then if it's critical, maybe notify your team. And so this is going to be running in the background, whether your team is online, offline. These are your workflows and times. The Storyboard workflows are running in the background. Users are not always looking at them and manually looking every time they run at what's happened. Once I build this, I'm probably going to be focused on the alerts it notifies me of. And so say that's the case, and now I'm in Slack and I get this notification. Before Workbench, I might have to, go look at the event data or go log into the SIM that identified it, but I'm actually going to click this investigate button now and we'll see Workbench in action. So as a summary, this looks like a high severity alert of a potential data exfiltration of a host. So let's click investigate, and that's going to create a link for me to follow to Workbench. And you'll notice a bit differently from the first time we saw Workbench, this has some embedded context at the top, and that is embedded context of the event from our Storyboard. So the event here that we sent in is going to have all of this data here, so you could see, for example, the entire alert that was originally ingested. But this is a lot to read through. This also isn't great to read. I'm going to have Workbench summarize it for me instead. So I'll say summarize, and based on the embedded context of that event, Workbench is going to have all of that information for me. I don't need to copy and paste it in. I don't need to try to explain it. Workbench has the context, and we can get started efficiently, not wasting any time. So we have a nice summary of what this high severity alert is, the affected host, the alert details, and some recommended actions. And so before I take any of the recommended actions, maybe I want to verify the current status if this is still relevant. So I'm going to say investigate the host. And you'll notice that was a bit vague there. With every conversation, Workbench will have the context of all messages sent in the conversation. So I don't need to specify the host. It knows what host I'm talking about, and it's going to go ahead and get the host details and then get the online status, sending back a summary of that host investigation. So we have all the data here of the host details, its status, security policies, and recommendations for further investigation. Maybe just looking at all of this, I feel pretty comfortable that we need to contain the device. So let's actually take, rather than just getting information, let's take our first action, right? So I'm going to say contain the device. And based on that, we're going to have Workbench run yet another action that is going to contain that host. So we can see here, unlike the others that were getting information, we were able to have those run quickly. This is going to take an actual action that is quite destructive. It's containing a device. We don't want to be running that with any sort of confirmation. So I'm going to confirm that. And you'll see what I did before is I checked the output here first to make sure what was sent in was correct. And then you can also see the output too. So if you ever want to verify the summary that you receive back from Workbench, you can always look into that further. So as a quick summary here, in real time, say we're monitoring a Slack channel or we're working in Slack, we can be notified and quickly and efficiently get information without having to log into CrowdStrike, log into other aggregate systems, and take action. There's more we could do. We could start a real-time response into that host itself. We could send summary emails or summarize this or create a case somewhere. There's so many more options, but for the sake of time and this webinar not being very, very long, let's go ahead and move on to the cases component. So we've seen how a really simple example of a storyboard event and how you can integrate that with Workbench. Now let's look at cases. So switching gears entirely, totally new example. We're not dealing with CrowdStrike in this one. You were assigned, say, to this case, and this is that an AWS bucket named TinesDemo27 was made public by a user. We can see a nice incident summary here, and I can use cases, with my team to decide who's going to take this, to provide updates. But at the end of the day, at some point, I need to actually investigate this, right, and take action. And where am I going to do that? Am I going to log into AWS? Am I going to do that all in different windows? Why don't I try doing it in Workbench? So let's go ahead and load this case up in Workbench. And similar to what we saw with that embedded context of the event, we have the same embedded context of this case. And you'll see the latest details of this object are available. That's actually kind of important to call out, especially when it comes to cases where there's lots of real-time information coming in. There might be more people adding further details or comments or maybe another alert related to this case came in too. When we're having this conversation with Workbench, it's going to be aware of all of that in real time. It's not just a static case event that's been sent in and then it's not aware of any updates. So based on this, I already have my case description here, so I don't need a summary like I did with the event ID, but let's go ahead and see what recommended next steps are. So I'm going to say, what are recommended next steps? And let's see what Workbench has to say back. So based on this incident, we have some recommended steps to ensure, first, the bucket policy. Then we're going to investigate the incident, investigate Steven, assess the impact. And with this is all just using the LLM's knowledge of based on this sort of alert, what would be recommended. If you, for example, had specific runbooks or specific items you would like for Workbench to be notified of, you could include that in your case context so it has that knowledge, as well as within your event ID context, just for further customization. We also support custom instructions. I actually don't have any specified here, so you're seeing it without any sort of custom instructions, but you could provide further context on your organization, its priorities. You could maybe say, you're a security analyst that focuses on XYZ, and this will be passed with every single prompt you send in, so it always has that context there as well. So based on all of this, let's start with verifying the bucket policy. So I'm going to say, verify the bucket, and what was that bucket's name? It was TinesDemo27 policy in AWS. And so now we're going to see use of a different tool this time, and we're going to use that AWS CLI command. This is going to run a CLI command to get the bucket policy of that bucket. So let's go ahead and confirm that. And once that runs, it'll get the output for me as well, similar to the CrowdStrike actions. So it functions in a similar way, regardless of the product we're using or the templates we're using. But it's great in that you are able to see the output of the different types of events. And so let's see what we got here. They attempted to retrieve the bucket policy, but it looks like there is no bucket policy set, or it no longer exists. And based on this, I might want to look in here. It looks like an error occurred. The bucket policy does not exist. So maybe there isn't a policy set on that bucket. So let's check if it's listed. Let's check if there are access settings. And so they're saying let's start by verifying if it exists. So they're just going to list all my buckets for me. yeah, let's go ahead and confirm that. So let's list all of our buckets. And once again, you know, if you had been building on the Storyboard or you had been in the AWS CLI command or the AWS CLI by yourself, one, you would have had to know what that command was, but two, if you get this back, you might not know exactly what to do. So Workbench is great at helping you troubleshoot as well. So it confirms that the bucket does exist. So let's check its access block settings. And so now we're going to go ahead and run that one to get the access block settings, and it looks like they're all set to false. So that means that there are no public access blocks in place along with no policy set. And so given that, it's likely controlled by the access control list. Now we're going to check that. And so you can see I'm driving this conversation, but what's great is Workbench is able to move quickly for me. I'm getting the data in real time and getting some nice additional insight based on that great general knowledge. Awesome. So looks like the ACL configuration is the reason why the bucket is currently public, and we should remove that access. So it recommends removing the public read access and enabling the blocking. I'm going to say yes, proceed with these steps. And now it's going to go ahead and do that for me. So let's remove the public read access. I'm going to go ahead and double check that this looks good to me. That does. So let's confirm that. And then as that runs, we're going to also go ahead and enable public access blocking for the bucket. Great. Once again, let's check that. We're setting them all to true. That looks good. So let's confirm. So we've quickly gotten our bucket current status. So we've investigated if the alert's still relevant. Then we've gone ahead and started to take remediative action immediately following that first recommended step of containing the bucket. And then it's even recommended, hey, let's double check that this was actually applied correctly. Let's check it. Once again, I can double check that this looks good. Yep. And so now it's going to run that again and double check the bucket policy. So it's really nice in that one, with the AWS CLI, it's incredibly powerful. I can access any resource that I give my credential that's selected, the permissions to access. So once again, it's scoped to what you give it permissions to do. And then based on that, I'm able to quickly and efficiently investigate these incidents, all with Workbench helping me along the way. And so once this is completed, looks like we have applied our changes successfully. The bucket has we no longer have that public access to the bucket, and now it's suggested some next steps too. But let's also investigate that user, right? So we want to see why that user was, making that bucket change anyway. So investigate Stephen. And now let's see what we do next. So certainly we're going to investigate Stephen's activity, and you'll see here so far in this demo, we've only been using our templates, which are provided out of the box. If you sign up for Workbench free today, you'll see all of these templates. You just need to connect them to your instances and select the relevant tools you'd like them to have access to. You can see in stories here, stories are provided by you. If you build any send to stories in Tines, you can have Workbench call those send to stories and get the output. So we've used one called look up a user in multiple platforms. We can see based on that he's an active user in Tines and other platforms. It even recommended getting the recent sign-in activities using Tines. They're telling me his sign-in activities, that he's been consistently active. And it's even recommending we check CloudTrail to see what his activities are related to the S3 bucket. Now, I do not have CloudTrail permissions enabled on this credential that I have for AWS CLI, so we're not going to do that for now. I'm going to say, tell me more information about Stephen. Summarize it. Because maybe I want to know more of if he's just an active user in Tines and other platforms. What other platforms is he part of? So now we have a nice summary here. He's the head of product, who he reports to. We have information about his access in Tines and Okta and Slack and Bamboo, and then some recent activity as well. And so maybe we go to reach out to him on Slack and it looks like he's offline, or maybe I know Steven and I think he's offline. And so it just seems a bit odd. So maybe we ask, can you check in Bamboo HR if he's out of office? And now we're going to check if he's out of office. We're going to use a get a list of who's out. So we started this accessing our AWS systems in real time. Now we're accessing our various different HR systems, Tines, Okta, Bamboo HR, Slack, to get information. And based on this, it looks like Steven is out of office for the entire month of September. Good for Steven. And that's a little odd though, given that he's making bucket changes while he should be out of office and not on his computer. And Workbench notes this too, because it has that context. It raises questions. It might be an automated process. So it's bringing up good points for me to consider as I continue to drive this investigation further. Maybe based on this, I'm going to say, I think his account may have been compromised. Reset his active sessions and password. And once again, we're going to run another story, reset the user's password and active sessions. I can double check they're putting in the right email and then confirm that. Awesome. It's even recommending me reset his sessions in Slack too. So there's so much we could continue to do. At this point though, we need to slowly start wrapping up this webinar. I don't need to keep you here all day. So I'm going to go ahead and say summarize the actions taken here and comment it on the case, because we've done a lot here and we need to update that case again, right? And so here is a nice summary of the actions, and a nice summary for us too, as we have gone through quite a number of use cases. So we investigated his activities, we reset his password, we reset his actions in Slack, and now it's adding a comment to that case. These actions were taken due to this suspicious activity. We can view that comment here too. I'm just going to go ahead and confirm that for the sake of continuing to wrap up this demo. And now we can go back and check this case, and we should see a new comment come in here soon. And it looks like we should see one. Let's see. Comment on a case. Oops, we got the wrong case ID. That's my bad. So let me say, no, use case ID 37704. And then it's going to go ahead and update that on the case ID. Perfect. And it's just going to load that up. We can once again review that. If we needed to make changes, we could. And then let's go ahead and confirm it. And now we should see a nice update here of next steps, what's happened so far. Awesome. So going back to this slide again, we've covered our storyboard and how Workbench can relate to event IDs with that CrowdStrike incident. We've covered our cases and how Workbench can relate with an AWS and IAM investigation. And at the start, we also covered just generally how you can interact with Workbench and create lots of new messages. So thanks so much for tuning in. We are going to open it up to Q&A now. So thank you all. Awesome. All right, let's get started with Q&A now. While you were watching the part that I pre-recorded, I've been gathering all of your questions. So we'll start with the ones that have already been sent in. And then if more come to mind, or you're just now seeing the comment box where you can ask questions, feel free to ask those and we'll get to them after I'm done with the initial questions that we received. So the first question, is Workbench an add-on to the platform or included with any license? So all of our cloud tenants have Workbench enabled on them as long as you have opted into your AI features, you can use Workbench in a limited capacity. Then you can also sign up to take part in a trial of Workbench, where you can explore the non-limited Workbench option, and then that would be purchased as an add-on. Next question is, what is the difference from tines and configuring API calls with an LLM like GPT-4? So when you are calling the, let me go back to Workbench. Let's get one here. Yeah, so when we're calling an action here, Workbench, the LLM powering Workbench, is not creating this API call. We've found through our own testing with this that it's not a great use of an LLM to create an API call, just because it relies on that general knowledge. There may have been updates or changes to API docs, as well as there is the likelihood that it could hallucinate parameters or something. So this is using the templates that Tines provides. So the templates themselves are provided by Tines. They're not created by in real time or anything by Workbench. And then Workbench, based on the context of your conversation, is giving the inputs to that provided template. So that would be the difference. It's not the same as going to any sort of LLM interface and saying, hey, create this API call to CrowdStrike for me. That's already created and provided by Tines and is not generated by an LLM. Next question. Does usage of Workbench go against the license count for our AI usage? I think this is referring to our AI action. The AI action, let me go back to the Q&A slide. The AI action has a license count, as in like the number of calls you could call it for. That does not apply for Workbench. They're separate. So Workbench is priced as an add-on, and any usage of Workbench will not take away from your AI action run count that you can allocate by team, those credits. Next question, does the Workbench chat hallucinate? So Workbench is powered by an LLM, and all LLMs hallucinate. We built Workbench with this in mind, and that's why Workbench is running your stories that you've built or the templates that Tines has created to reduce the ability or the likelihood of hallucination. So it's not going to be hallucinating an API call, or it's not going to be hallucinating steps to take in a story that is static, that's created and built by you. But just the same way as interacting with any LLM, there's always the possibility for hallucination, which is why, in addition to running pre-built templates and stories, which are not going to be hallucinating, we also allow you to see your inputs and outputs, right? So you can always see what was input and what was output and verify that this is, once again, coming straight from that action or story run. So there won't be any hallucinations within this. All right, next question. In addition to having Workbench fetch data from APIs, can we also use semantic search, provided data such as runbooks, and other knowledge-based articles? This came in a little bit before I covered some options for that in the second demo with cases, but I'll just cover that again. That being that you can always provide custom instructions. So if you have specific custom instructions you would like Workbench to apply, you can do that there. And then you can also include your runbooks or other knowledge-based information within cases or events that Workbench can then have within the context of the conversation, as well as you can set up a story to access that data via an API if you have that kept in, say, a specific page or external database that has API access. You can then access it via a story or templates there. So a couple different options for doing that. Second question, how can we request new Workbench templates? I know we can create our own stories and make them available to Workbench. Yep, that's correct. So you can create your own stories and make them available to Workbench. Templates are provided by Tines out of the box. However, it is on the roadmap to allow users to create their own templates, their own private templates that they'd be able to access here too. So keep an eye out for that. It is in the works. Specific to the demo, what if I want to change the containment option for CrowdStrike? So I think that was this one. So we took actions on the hosts, and the action we put in was contain. What if we wanted to change that? You simply just would not confirm this action, and instead you'd say, no, take XYZ action or whatever other option or action you wanted to take on that host. Once again, because it's provided by the template, this template, take action on hosts, has a number of different actions you can take on the host. So it would just be prompting Workbench to do your preferred action and then confirming once it meets your preferences. All right, still a bit confused on how to set this up. Hopefully we'll cover it. Maybe we just need a quick blurb on the stories template systems integrations through Times to get Workbench up and running. Yeah, great question. So if you create a community edition with Times today, or if you are in your Times tenant, you're going to be able to see templates out of the box here. The way that you will go to set it up is, for example, if I wanted to set up like any of these templates, like ServiceNow, say, I would then head in, either connect a new credential. This will kick off a connect flow that'll guide you through how to set up your credential with ServiceNow, or choose an existing credential if that already exists in your tenant. Once you've done that, you're then going to select which templates you would like Workbench to access. And then once that has been configured, once you've selected those, it's going to look like these ones with that green dot there. So it'll be enabled. So that's the first step, I would say, to setting up and getting started with Workbench. And then stories-wise, if you have already built send to stories that you'd like to enable for Workbench, I recommend going ahead and configuring those. The steps to configure them are listed on our website here. So you can see conversation tools, stories. So here are the configuration requirements for configuring your story. I can show you an example of that too. If I just go look at, for example, this story, if you command click on a story, you can view it on the storyboard. So here's the story we had called to reset that user's password in Okta. The way that I fulfill these requirements to make this available to Workbench will just be to make sure it has a name and a description, so that way the LLM knows when to use it in the context of your conversation. And then enable send to story settings, define some inputs, and then enable for Workbench and send to story, and determine if you want to allow for confirmation in Workbench. If that seemed like a lot, and you're looking for an even quicker way to get started with some stories specifically, I recommend checking out our story library. If you look by feature, you can see Workbench, and our wonderful labs team has already built 52 stories that you can import and have that all of those configuration options preset for you just to review before you enable them in Workbench too. So definitely recommend checking this out too. All right. What logging or visibility is there to Workbench that's done by others, like admins or teams? Wanted to see what was done by a user or find out who made, how easy could that be done? That's a great question. And definitely is important to cover. I had pulled up our audit logs here. So within audit logs, you can see, for example, during this demo, you can see different messages that I sent, as well as the tools called. So within the audit logs, admins are going to be able to see that data across the tenant for all users using Workbench. And you'll be able to access this. This is our UI of the audit logs, but you can also access it via the API as well. All right, and that was all the questions that came in during the demo, and I've seen some additional ones come in afterwards. So let me read those really quickly. All right, great. Okay, I found where I've left off. Thank you for your patience. If we have a product that doesn't already have an integration, do we simply request it via Time support? Yep, that's a great way to request that, and then we can add that to our list to support via Workbench. So that would be the best next step. Is cases required for maximum functionality? No, I wouldn't say so. We covered a a demo here that covered cases. I think that given it's another product of Tines, it works very well with Workbench, but you're able to use cases really, even if you have another case management system, you can ingest that via an event and use that in Workbench. You can also, as we did at the very beginning of the demo, just start a new chat and start typing in and using Workbench ad hoc as you would without ingesting that case context at the start. So I would say it's a nice benefit to using Tines cases is just that nice integration of our in-house products, but I would by no means say that it's required for maximum functionality. I use Workbench daily in my job, and I'm not frequently using it within the context of cases. So I wouldn't let that sway you from not trying it out. All right. Is it possible to create our own templates, or is that done as a send a story? If the latter, do those count against our story unit count? Great question. So I said before in one of the earlier questions, it is on our roadmap to allow for end users to be able to create their own templates. These templates are, they have defined inputs, essentially, kind of similar to those stories, which makes them nice and easy to run with Workbench because then the LLM knows the required inputs to provide. So once we allow for that capability, you'll be able to add your own private templates to Workbench to run. In the meantime, yes, stories would be the correct way to do it. And your question on if it's the latter, do those count against our story unit count is a great question. And I'm glad that you asked. So we have this detailed here. Essentially, there is a toggle enable for send a story, Workbench and send a story, or Workbench. If you enable Workbench, it does not count against your licensing count for story units. So you are able to build as many stories for Workbench to use, and that's all just going to be included in your add-on cost of using Workbench rather than any sort of story unit licensing count. Now, if you do only enable for Workbench, it's not going to run like a story that would cost for your licensing count, right? So it won't run on a schedule or it won't run autonomously from external sources. It'll only be available to be accessed and run by Workbench. So a little bit different there, but that's all detailed once again here in the docs. Great question. So that means you can build as many stories and get as much maximum functionality out of Workbench without it impacting or affecting your license count, which was important to us since it makes it all the more powerful. Are stories built by humans or AI? Stories are built by humans. So we have the stories here built by our labs team, which is a very human team. And I would highly recommend checking them out. It can save you time in customizing or building your own stories. And then similar to our, or using our storyboard feature that is built and interacted with by humans. Can you enable Workbench functionality through Slack, like a Slack bot? Not currently, but it is something we are looking into. It is obviously a chat interface similar to Slack, so I think it would be interesting to explore that further, but not currently. Can you limit the access rights to allow only Workbench access for L1 support? Yeah, this is a great question. It's kind of worth calling out that the rest of Tines is set up based on a team-based approach. So you're a user in one or many teams, and then you have different permissions based on the team that you are in. Workbench is set up for the individual. So if you are an individual in the tenant, you have access to Workbench. And then from that, you can access any of the credentials or stories that you could access within your team that you have the permissions to access. It's pretty similar to if you have the ability to run a story or run an action using a credential in a team, you will then also have that ability within Workbench itself. If you are a viewer in a team, you would not have the ability to do that. Therefore, you will not have the ability in Workbench. So it mirrors your permissions within the team. So it would depend on how you have your L1 support set up within your team. And just because you probably want to see this in writing too. The access details, specifically the permissions needed, are noted here as well. We are looking into defining like team-based presets though for different groups of users as well. So I think that might be a nice additional option for you then based on the way that you have your L1 support access set up. Next question, I don't see any stories on my stories tab. What might be the reason? The reason would be that you most likely don't have them enabled for Workbench yet. So if you go into any story and enable it as a send a story, and then select Workbench or Workbench and send a story and make sure it has the story name and description, then you should see it appear on your stories tab. Feel free to reach out to our support team too, and we can help you there. And in addition, if you'd like, go ahead and follow the docs on that. You can also, if you don't have any send a story set up, just import one from our library Workbench feature here too. When will Workbench be available in EU tenants? Workbench is being rolled out to EU tenants as we speak. We rolled it out to all paying customers yesterday, and then should be available to all Community Edition tenants by end of day today. Can Workbench be used in the Community Edition? Yes. Workbench is available in that limited capacity that I mentioned to all tenants, even Community Edition. And then if you'd like to experience it in its full capacity, then we recommend doing that trial. And then assuming you like it, buying it as an add-on to use for your whole team. Awesome. I think that was it. If you have any last questions, feel free to send them through. Before we wrap up, if this was exciting to you and you want to get started, I would like to give a shout out that we are having a boot camp over Times Workbench. So maybe if you had some questions about getting set up or want to, figure out where to start or how to start or the best ways to use it, I recommend tuning into that Workbench boot camp. It'll be on October 2nd. The sign up for it comes out tomorrow. So you can't sign up yet for it today. Stay tuned for posts from our social media to sign up for the Workbench bootcamp tomorrow. Awesome. And it's on October 2nd. The sign up comes out tomorrow, not the bootcamp, to be clear. Okay. Great. Thank you all so much. I am very excited about Workbench. I hope you are too, and I can't wait to see how all of you use it and get your feedback. Thanks again for tuning in, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you.